Hello, this is Guy Manning from Damanek, and you're listening to Sonic Perspectives.
For many years, Guy Manning has expressed his musical vision through the band Damanek. And make no mistake, Damanek is Manning's project, although he often surrounds himself with outstanding musicians and producers. His latest release, the third, is called Making Sure, and it is a tour de force, one that melds together many musical genres to come up with a very unique sound, and a pleasing one at that. I'm Mark Boardman of Sonic Perspectives, and today we are talking with Guy Manning. Guy, welcome to Sonic Perspectives.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here and chatting.
So, and this is a question that I get frequently, you may get it as well. What is a Damanek?
Damanek is the name of a band of which I am fronting. That's the pedantic answer. How we came up with the name is you'd have to go back to the history of how we started. I can give you a little bit of that if you like.
Please. Yes.
Having done a lot of solo albums for many years, I was looking around for collaborative projects, and Mark Truiak from Unitopia at that time, that had just gone into a hiatus, was looking to form the United Progressive Fraternity project. And he asked me if I'd like to be involved. And I said, yeah, it sounds good. We have very similar ideas about world issues and concerns. So I said, yes, I'd help out. And he said, well, who else could we get? And I said, well, I happen to know a not bad saxophone player and a pretty good bass player, and I could have a word with them. And so I had a word with Marek Arnold, and I had a word with Dan Mash. And Marek plays in a lot of bands. He's based in Leipzig in Germany, plays in Seven Steps to the Green Door, Cyril, Toxic Smile, plays across the board, fantastic sax player, and good keyboard player as well, actually.
Yes.
And also I knew Dan Mash from his time and tenure with the Tangent, and also with Machine, playing with Luke Machin in Machine. And we became like the European arm of the Australian UPF. So we became, the European beggars on the other end. And we did the first album for UPF, Fall in Love with the World, and went off on a short and memorable, for probably the wrong reasons, tour of Europe. And then came back, and I settled down to write some pieces to put forward for the next UPF album, as I thought. So I had Dan in mind for the bass, and Marek playing the sax, and Mark singing, and me doing a bit of keyboards if I could. And, and that was how I settled into the writing thing. And then when I caught up with Mark and said, I've got all these songs, I sent them to him, and he said, well, yeah, I quite like them, but they're not quite the way I want to go. And besides which, I'm working more with Steve Unruh now in America, and the pieces, we are going in a slightly different direction. And I said, well, okay, if you don't want them, you don't want them. That's fine, but I'm okay. So then I sat for a few minutes and wondered what to do with, the hard drive full of material that I'd worked on. And so I said to Marek and Dan, look, I've got all this material. I think some of it's not bad. Why don't we record it, as our own project? And they said, yeah. So they came over to the house. Dan came up from the south coast of England, and Marek flew in from Leipzig, and we sat for a few days sort of sifting through the demos and saying, is this something? Is it something? Could it be something? Who knows? And we decided, yeah, we'd start it. So the three of us started out looking at it. So what we're going to call the band? Well, I don't know, so I said, well, I'll make something up. So I'll take the DA from Dan Mash, Man from Manning, and the EK from Marek, and we'll call it Damanek. It's as good a name as anything else, and if Yes can get away with it for years, it doesn't really matter what you call yourself. So we became Damanek. Of course, then I started saying, well, it's very nice, we've got this project off the ground, but really we need a better keyboard player than I am. and I happened to know somebody that I could ask. So I got in touch with Sean Timms, obviously, also on hiatus from Unitopia at that time and working with Southern Empire now, his own project, and said, look, I'm putting this thing together. We'd known each other, kept in touch since about 2010, actually, when I first met them at Summer's End in England. And I said, what do you think? And he said, play me the stuff. And I played it. I said, yep, I'm in. So we sort of became a quartet, but we didn't go back and call it Damanek Timms. So unfortunately, he was sort of left out the name, but the name was just it was something to hang the hat on, wasn't it, in the end, really? And so that's how Damanek got its name and how we came into being.
So now you're on your third album, making sure. Would it be proper to call it a COVID album, one that was influenced by the quarantine and everything?
I think it was impacted by the quarantine and the pandemic. I'm not sure it was influenced by it. I mean, there aren't any songs about that particular ailment on the albums, but certainly impacted the progress we made. So I wrote songs for it a good while before we actually got around to actually putting them into production, because I came off doing in flight, and because I get bored very easily, I started to write again. So I started to write the pieces that were going to be on Making Sure. I mean, I had a couple of pieces left over that I was still fiddling with from a previous writing session, and I hadn't finished. So Back to Back was one of those. And then I sat down to write this material. And then I sat down, for some reason, I decided to write Oculus. I don't know where that came from. That must have been a fitful night's sleep or something. And had this material ready, and then we started talking about how we're going to record it, and then that's when COVID really got in the way, because Sean's running a commercial audio studio. He works with companies doing voiceovers, he does demos and things like that, and quite lucrative business, and he's very good at it. And of course, we couldn't get anybody into the studio. Nobody could work with anybody, because it was just the rules, especially in Australia at that time, were quite strict. So the whole thing sort of went on to the back burner. And then when we did come out of we started to see a light at the end of the tunnel from COVID. Then he was involved in moving studio. He decided that the premises inside Adelaide were good, but they needed to move. The lease was up and it was time to go. And he wanted to move and create his own studio at home on his own home property grounds, where he could stay close to the family and work, have a nice work-life balance. So he started to build that. So that got in the way, because we had all the moving and things. And then I wasn't very well, and then he wasn't very well. And I think Marek was very well, but he probably pretended to be ill just to join the club. And then we started to try and get off the block again, and we started moving, and we got bits done. We got the drums done at the same time as Sean was recording Southern Empire 3 drum track with Brody. We extended the session and did the Making Sure drums at the same time, so it was all set up and ready to go. So we had the drums, fantastic, but we still had a lot of people that we needed to get involved. We were looking around about working out who was going to play the bass. At that point, I'd been across to see Marek early on in the process, and I spent a few days in Leipzig with him, and we'd gone through the demos, so he knew what was coming, and he provided a little bit of textual keyboards on a thing called the C-board, which is a very tactile MIDI controller. So instead of switching with your hand left, you use your fingers, and you can slide up and slide down and slide across. The notes bend to your touch. It's a very tactile experience, and it gets some very interesting sort of effects by using that. So I came back from Germany with his sort of ideas, and then he settled into creating saxophone arrangements for the pieces, and they were still on my hard drive, still my projects at that time. I'd done all the instrumentation, all the demos, and all the lyrics and everything, and sung them in and everything. So we had a working demo. And it went out to Sean, and then as soon as Sean gets it, once he's happy with it, he takes over ownership, and it becomes the master project over in Australia. And anything we do up to that point, any updates and amendments, we have to send via Dropbox to him so he can include it in the project over there. And then we got on more. There was more bits of illness, and other people couldn't get in, and the people we wanted were double booked. And then Sean got very busy on contract for a lucrative streaming company. I won't mention their name, but I've got a subscription to it, and I've just been binging on it lately. And that's been very good for him. And of course, that's his work. He can't pass up work to do what is, in a sense, sort of a vanity project, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get much of a budget. The record label doesn't give us any advance or anything, so we have to stump up from our personal coffers to try and get things off the mark and hope to recoup some of the costs back from future sales. So I decided to do the GoFundMe route and try and ask people to help us out, mainly to pay Sean, because I mean I can work all the hours in my little studio, and Marek's quite happy to pitch him within reason. But Sean, when he's working on Damanek or something, he's not working on earning money. So we had to do that. So we got the GoFundMe going, got a nice little sum which sort of covered his production time, and then he was ready to go. It was just a matter of finding the time when he could do it. Yeah. And it just went on for months about it. I've got jobs, I can't do this, I'm in the middle of doing that. And then suddenly, the clouds broke, the light came streaming through, and some time was up, and he was able to say, you know what, next couple of weeks, this is it, I'm mixing now. That's it, we're into the mix. And it happened pretty quickly after that, and everything came off flying off the box. So I had to find a title for the album, making sure, sort of branding. We'd had on track, 2 words, in flight, 2 words. So I needed one for the sea now, because I'd had rail and I'd had air. So I needed one. So I didn't want to call it At Sea, because that's not quite the connotations I wanted, although it felt like we were all at sea with it. So I called it Making Sure, because I thought it was a little play on words, from SHORE and SURE. And I thought, I laughed heartily when I thought of it. Ha ha, that's very funny. So I did that, and then we got the cover done, and that represents the journey. The cover art, actually, the album represents the journey of this album probably better than anything else. There's a lifeboat struggling to get to a lighthouse in the distance with sharks underneath, lightning above, and huge waves pushing it back. That's what it felt like, trying to get this thing over the line. So that's it. He said, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, that's it. How would you, as sort of the center point of Damanek, how would you define its sound if you had to tell somebody this is what we are like?
It's difficult, that, because I don't think we sound like a lot of people, to be honest. We're very happy to wear our influences, I would say. And if we're on some of these tracks, you can definitely hear sort of Steely Dan calling in the distance somewhere, on some of the arrangements. But I tend to I sit and write what I feel like, and I don't think about anything. I don't think, oh, we need a funky one, and we need a really slow tear-stained ballad. I just write what I write, and you get things like Reflections on Copper, which is quite quirky, Back to Back, which is sort of slinky and funky, Americana, which started out actually quite rustic. I had in mind more of a arrangement like the band, sort of lots of acoustic guitars, and Sean said, no, let's turn it on its head and make it quite slick and funky, but with still the same message about struggling farms in Missouri. So Sean and I work quite closely on sort of bending the arrangements and trying things, but we'll try anything. That's why I stuck a reggae section in Mountain of Sky for no reason whatsoever, other than I thought it sounded good. So I put it in. I didn't think about it being, this was about Tibet and what the hell were the Jamaicans doing there. So I write what I write, and it turns out, because of the input from the 3 of us and the other players, it turns into Damanek. It's a bit like magic. I can't say how it happens. It just sort of does.
Mm-hmm. It's an alchemy of sorts.
Yeah, yeah. Take all the things and put it all into a big bucket with a stick, stir it copiously until it comes to the boil, and then serve it fresh and healthy and hearty to anybody who wants to hear it and will have to pay a few dollars to get it.
Well, if I could, the things that I hear in there, and it's part of the mixture throughout, you can hear pop, you can hear world music, you can hear reggae, you can hear folk, you can hear prog. There are elements of classical in there, and I'm sure there are things that I'm leaving out that just escaped my ears, perhaps on the 5th or 6th listen. But all of those things you take and put together, and it's really pretty remarkable what you come up with.
I think I don't understand it either. There's no hip hop in there.
No,
I don't
no.
think. But I think we've covered our bases pretty much everywhere else. As I say, I just write what I feel like. And through the process of creative decision making and pairing away and rationalization between the three of us, it turns out sounding like Damanek. That's just the way it's always going to have those big production values because it ends up on Sean's mixing desk. And that's the way he mixes. All three albums have got the same sound because that's his sound. The writing, well, that's a matter of luck. and Marek's arrangement depends on how much sax we manage to shoehorn into the tracks. I mean, sometimes I worry that there can't be a sax solo in every song. It would be too much. But for the sax player, what do you do? So we work on him creating these sort of ensemble arrangements for multiple saxophones, layered saxophones, and duetting saxophones, rather than and here's another sax solo. We try and work it more creatively to get the saxophone in there without it becoming yet another saxophone solo. Right. And I think we're pretty successful at that now. I think we're just feeling more confident, really, of the whole thing. The process seems to work, and we found a way of making it work. And who knows what we're going to do next? I don't know yet.
Sure. Yeah, to me, Marek's saxophone, which at times is on top doing a solo and other times is a bit down in the mix, that is one of the trademark sounds of the band. He really helps create a mood and environment with his instrument.
It does. It wouldn't be absolutely would not be the same without Marek's input. I mean, nobody should ever think of him of just being the sax player.
No.
Because he's far more than that. He has a far keener ear. And Marek has got this, is really infuriating sometimes because he's like the princess on the P, if you remember that story.
Yes.
He can hear a bum note 15 layers down. He can hear that the 15th kazoo is slightly out of tune. I can't. I'm listening, thinking this sounds great. And he's going, there's something down here, something not quite right. I'm going, what? And I peel it away. And sure enough, there's a bass note which isn't, in the right scale with something else, and he's heard it. He brings that musicality to it. Sean's got the vision and the production stuff. Marek's got this musicality, and I suppose I just knocked together the tunes and the lyrics. That's my part. I'm the Tim Pan Alley guy of the band.
Well, it all works. There's no question. Each of you has your responsibility, and they all mix very well. I assume that your personal relationships with the others, including the trust factor, make it pretty easy to allow them to come in and give their parts.
Yeah, it is. The sad thing for us is we're geographically challenged.
Yeah.
We'd love to get in a room together and do it, and talk it through and discuss things. But it's a lot of toing and froing through Dropbox and auditioning and sending it. I like that bit, but I didn't like that bit. And at 6 minutes 53, it's definitely out. Yeah. So it makes it difficult for us, but we sort of make it work because we have to. You're never going to get with us really that sort of close, I suppose, Beatles experience of getting into a room and hammering it out together and playing off, I like that bit, I can put something behind that. We're not going to get that. It really starts with me as a composer. I compose it all basically, and I send it out there, and Marek adds and changes, and Sean takes away all the rubbish, throws it in the bin, and puts in some better keyboard parts. But a good percentage of the keyboards on the album is me, but everybody thinks it's Sean, of course. But there are a lot of it is me. But if it's something that's got a bit of class to it and sounds like it might be tricky, it's more likely to be Sean.
Yeah.
I would say so. But yeah, it just seems to work.
It
Why?
does.
Don't know.
Very much.
I don't want to think about it too much because and break the spell,
That's right. The magic will go away somehow.
Yeah, if you overanalyze it.
Right. Making Sure is set up sort of old style in that there is what would be the equivalent in the record days of a first side and a second side, so that the first side is a series of songs which, although not necessarily interrelated, certainly have your vision, which tends towards ecological concerns, population concerns, those sorts of things. And the second side is a tour de force where the songs are all united, not only musically, but lyrically. Can we start off with the first side and how some of those songs came about?
Well, I don't really know how they came about. As I say, I write what I write. So I write something and I think, well, okay, what the problem I've always got, without sounding too crass, is I'm a middle-aged guy sitting in a in the middle of an urban city in Leeds in England. What am I going to write about? I'm not writing about bungee jumping in the Appalachians or anything. And there's only so much personal experience I can bring to bear a lot of this. So I look to cast my net further afield. I look to think that I'm actually interested in saying, I think we've got a problem here, Houston, in the world. There's certain things that need calling out or addressing. And I don't say that what I'm writing will cure the world's ill, but it's just another voice in the crowd, basically saying we think we've got a problem. And when we get to talk about noonday candles, that's exactly what that song's about. That one voice can make a difference. A candle in the noonday sun is completely dwarfed by the sun, but it's important. It still burns bright. That one voice might be the one voice that makes the difference, that takes you over the tipping point. So Mountain of Sky, I had the title Mountain of Sky. I thought, well, that's a great title. What shall I write about?
It is.
So Everest, why not? So the idea that Everest can be conquered, what a laugh. We conquered Everest. You conquered it, did you? Yeah, I can see it trembling with them. It stands there aloof, and it's going to be there a long time after we're all gone. It's out there, and it's beyond, up and beyond, and out of the world's petty problems down below. 29,000 feet below, people are killing each other, and this thing's just stretching up and looking up ever upwards. So that's what it's about, really. Back to Back was about overpopulation, about standing back to back, and the worries about what we're going to do about the world's limited resources.
Right.
And Noonday Candles, as I say, is about it addresses sort of an issue about child hunger, I suppose. If we can spend all this money on huge technological projects that boosts our ego and make us feel good about ourselves, it's a shame that there's kids actually starving while all this is going on.
Yeah.
I don't say that putting people on the moon wasn't a great thing to do. I'm just saying it'd be nice to have a little bit of to and fro sometimes. We spend a lot of time trying to big ourselves up as a race. Woohoo. I don't feel personally that we're quite fit ambassadors to go out into space just yet. I wouldn't want to put us on board a spaceship with all our problems and go out there and pollute the rest of the universe, but perfectly honest. But I think that, so it addresses that, and that idea that one voice, one candle in the sunshine is still burning bright and has a point. So that's that. Americana was about climate change. It's about the real impact on Midwestern farming due to the changes in climate. And this, I tend to write in the first person, or I tend to write as a person so that you can empathize with the plight of that person. And in this particular case, this guy's inherited his farm from his father. They've all grown up. It's a heritage farm. They've been there for years, and he's struggling to make ends meet. His cows are struggling to come out of the mud, and his crops are failing. But they bind together. The love of the family holds them together, and there's always hope. And that's what Americana is about. It's not a down song, but it's about love triumphing over adversity, I guess.
Yeah.
In Deep Blue is probably the sort of exception in the first half, because that is about a true life event. That's about my son going off and wanting to do scuba diving in Greece while we were there, and it's not something he would normally jump at because he's got he's got an Asperger's syndrome, and you wouldn't know. I mean, he's very hyper. You wouldn't really know, but sometimes he finds social interaction and social situations difficult. But he insisted on doing this himself. I'm going to go scuba diving. I don't need you kids. You kids hold me back. I'm going to go there. And when we thought, wow, he really is growing up. And he came back and he told us all about it. And he told us how marvelous it was. He was scared, but he went in, and that song's really a personal paean to him, really, and the bravery of, going out of your comfort zone.
Sure.
So that was that. And then we got to Reflections on Copper, which is about, sadly, it's about dementia. And I know people who have got that condition, and it's sad to see the lights slowly going out, fading, and so that's about a guy reflecting on his life and what he can remember. And the title that is an odd one, really. I don't know how I came up with this, but I felt that inside you, when you look inside at your memories and the way you think, normally you're holding a mirror up to yourself, and you can see yourself, and you can see your past ahead of, you can see it in that reflected clearly in the mirror. Yeah. But with a person with dementia, that mirror is not made out of shiny metal. It's made out of copper. It's slightly distorted. It's slightly dull. And so those reflections in copper are skewed and getting worse as the condition sadly worsens. So that's where that came about. Yeah. And finally, Crown of Thorns is another climate change. It's about the erosion of the Great Barrier Reef. Quite appropriate thing for seeing Sean's out there, but I never actually got to the Great Barrier. I went to visit them in Australia, but I never got to the Great Barrier Reef, sadly. But I do research. I mean, the songs I tend to, when I'm lyrically, I try to look at them from a research point of view. I look into the detail of it, and I'll do the research on it, so I can create a lyric which hopefully encapsulates all those ideas without having to be too prescriptive, if you like. Sure. So I can talk about the Great Barrier Reef in a educated way, I suppose. Hopefully, if the lyric works. So that's the first half. Songs about the human condition, social, econo, political concerns. Usual standard fare for Damanek, I think.
Yeah, well, it is. It is very much. Those are the ones that are, I guess you would say, thematically, musically linked to the past, with that, but being new unto themselves and having something new to offer. I noticed when I asked you about the songs, you talked about the lyrics. Do the lyrics come first and then the music, or vice versa?
Normally the music comes first. I usually spend time in the studio just experimenting with rhythms and chords, and I'll have a whole hard drive full of things called, snippet number 1, snippet number 2, and a whole raft of them. And then what I do is I leave them to percolate for a while, and I come back to them, I pull them out and go, nah. No, that one's got something about that one. Okay, I'll put that one over in the maybe pile. And I try to, once I've got an idea, once I've got the sort of rhythmic idea and how it's sort of going to feel and sound, then I start to think about the subject matter, and then I start to put the lyrics together fairly quickly, actually. I don't find lyric writing particularly difficult, he said, blowing his own trumpet or saxophone. So it's really about the light bulb coming on. You have those light bulb moments where you think, I know what this one's going to be about, and now I'm off and running. And so it's mostly the music that comes first. But with Oculus, that was a different story. Then I started to write the story and the libretto part of it first, before the music, really.
Do you know what sparked you on this? Because there's certain elements of Alice Through the Looking Glass and some allusions to the Wizard of Oz during the pieces. Is that what started you off in the path, or what?
No, I think all those are, they're all in there, and I freely admit it. In fact, they're in the lyrics. I talk about Oscar Wilde and H.G. Wells and Joni Mitchell and everybody else that sort of had a hand in helping shape it. But the idea was about, really, it was just a notion that you look in a mirror and what you're seeing isn't actually the same as what's behind you. That's how it started. And what would you do under those circumstances? Would you go rub your eyes and go and take a long lie down in a dark room, immediately check yourself into some psych ward somewhere? I don't know. But this guy, he looks in it, and he's one of those curious sort of gung-ho types who thinks there must be some purpose to this, and he does all the research like I do on the lyrics, and he goes away and gets all these esoteric old books and stuff, and he realizes that there is a way of transcending reality, and so he approaches this, and he realizes with the proper mantras and the rest of it, he can travel between the boundaries. He can pass through the glass, and he can put his hand through the glass, and he can put his head through the glass, which is fine. But what he doesn't expect, of course, is as he's going one way, that the reflection's coming the other way. The hand and you're exchanging places. And the other thing he doesn't realize is that he thinks he's going to step straight through the mirror into the living room that he sees behind him. No, he stepped into a corridor which is invisible, this barrier, and he sees a corridor. And he looks up and down the corridor, and he sees endless doors going up that way to the left, and endless doors to the right. And you can see as he's walking through, he sees endless versions of himself that way, and then the opposite reverses going the other way. He realizes that you don't have to go straight into the room ahead. You can go up the corridor 3 doors and in, and by doing that, he realizes each existence is a variant upon his own life. He starts off noticing that his son has sadly died, and the ashes are on the mantelpiece, but in the reflection it isn't. That's what starts the whole thing off. So he can go to a place where his son's still alive, or he can go and walk a dog who died 20 years ago, but he's still alive in this reality, and it's all going swimmingly well. It's all going brilliantly well. He's having a whale of a time trying out different things, and as long as he plays the part when he gets there, doesn't go too silly, and he plays the part of the person in the new reality, then all's well until he passes into a reality where he just suddenly feels quite out of body, not literally, quite out of body. He doesn't feel well at all. He looks on the mantelpiece, and there's 2 urns there now. One's his son's, and the other's him. He's gone into a reality where he's dead. Well, okay, that's a bit unfortunate, isn't it? Because now he's got no power. He's a ghost. People are walking through him rather than interacting. He's just, all he can do is stand there as people walk through him, don't even realize he's there, and he's watching this other guy in the mirror having a whale of a time, getting older. He's redecorating his room, all that sort of stuff, and he thinks that that's it. That's how he's going to see the end of his days come out, just gradually drifting away. And then one day everything goes black. The other fella's sadly passed away, and through this sort of merging and the end of their lives, the fella at the other side pushes his hand through, and they exchange places, and he's back in the corridor again, and he races as fast as he can back to the original room where he came from. And because they've gone through this journey together, the whole time resets, and he's back to the moment he first stood in front of the mirror all those years ago. He's back to where he was, and he realizes there's no place like home. And that's sort of the underlying Wizard of Oz thing. But it's a mishmash of all sorts of ideas: time machine, Oscar Wilde, Dorian Gray. It's got obviously Lewis Carroll implications. The theme starts that I'm not Alice, but I'm looking through the glass. It acknowledges all these sources of literary stuff, and it's like, again, it's just a mashup of all these ideas into something which is just I thought was an interesting story. It's not wholly original, but it's a blending of ideas and literary bits and pieces and songs that have meant something to me, and they're all together in one, like I did with the rest of the stuff, all mixed in with a big stick in a bucket.
One thing that I think unites all of those influences is they're about choices. Certainly this narrative is about choices that you make or don't make, and the kind of ramifications that result from making those choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the character says, he's waiting for he's seeing parts of a life that he once deserved. It's all going on beyond him, and now he's waiting the end of days, and he still needs to atone for all his sins, and he's getting he's reaping what he sowed, but by luck, through faith and prayer and all the rest of it, he ends up back where he came from, and he's so grateful and thankful that he turns his back on everything and says, never again am I going to do that. It's better to be living your life with the cards you were dealt than living fantastic other variations which are unreal. And so it's a funny old journey he's gone, this fella, and he's come to a reality check point in his life when he realizes there is no place like home.
That's a funny journey that you've taken in the process of putting all that together too.
Well, I had to be him. Interestingly enough, when I first wrote Oculus, and it was the reason it's in two parts is the album, because we didn't know whether to put them together or what. We didn't know what we had all these songs in the first half, and then we had this sort of oddity thing. The second half, do you put them together? Do you have a separate disc for it? What do you do? It could be a separate album, you know, the beginning of a separate album. But we decided to put them together because we had all this stuff, and we thought, no, publishing be damned, you know. Yeah. Let's just get it out there. But yeah, I had choices to make about how that was going to manifest itself, and the choices, yeah, we made several choices to try and to get us to where we are, and I had to live the part of the central character, and I approached other singers. Funnily enough, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to pull this one off. You know, normally I'm not the greatest singer in the world, but I manage. You know, I can hold a tune, just about. So I managed, but with Oculus, I thought this really deserves, you know, the full on. You know, you need somebody who's got the balls and the gravitas and the code, you know, to be able to pull it off. So I approached a few people, and for various reasons, it just didn't work. They were all interested in doing it, names that you would have heard of, but I won't drop them in, you know. And through circumstances, it just never happened. And so I just ended up saying, well, you know, if there's nobody else, it's going to have to be me then, isn't it? So I went back to the task of doing it, and I think I did it okay. Majority of it I'm happy with. But it would have been interesting to hear how some of these people I would had in the frame for it would have sounded. It would have sounded very different, that's for certain.
I'm
but
sure
it would have been a female in one case.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been a girl standing in front of the mirror. And that would have put a whole different perspective on things, I think.
It would have. But the perspective that you bring to it, because you're the writer, because you're the person behind putting all these influences together in the narrative, that gives it a good perspective too, one that wouldn't be found with any other person.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think sometimes I write things so idiosyncratically that no matter how good a person would be as a singer, they probably wouldn't fulfill my vision of how it should be sung. And I think that's very egotistical of me, I think, in some ways. But I don't know. I mean, a lot of people could have approached that task and sung it beautifully, melodiously, but they wouldn't have put the story across in the way that I wanted it to be, with the character it needs to be brought out. And sometimes singing it peculiarly in that idiosyncratic way is the way that the story has to be told to make it believable and sell it, you know, as an idea. Otherwise, it's just, you know, it's not quite right. You know, it's more akin to an opera than it is to a pop song. It's trying to tell a story, and you have to be conscious of the story in order to get it across the line properly, really, and make it believable for the people listening to it, I think.
And you certainly have the info on your website, not just lyrics, but also story behind it. So that for the uninformed, they can go to that and become a bit more informed.
Yeah. Well, the problem is I'm not Peter Gabriel. So the thing is, I tried to write a story which was fairly understandable. I didn't write The Land Lies Down in Broadway, which I've read several times on the inside cover and still can't make head or tail of what's going on half the time. But who cares? You know, but with The Lamb, you don't care. But I wrote a story which I thought was fairly understandable, and I wanted to make sure, rather than, sometimes I will leave you up to, with the rest of the songs in the first half. Normally you can sit in there and make of it what you will. It can impact with you, it can affect you, and be emotive in any way you would like, and you can empathize or you don't empathize or whatever. But with Oculus, I was telling a specific story, and so I thought it was better to probably dictate what that storyline would be rather than let people make up their own ideas. I mean, I remember writing a song for the Manning number 10 album called Valentine's Night, and I got a lot of people writing in and saying it's what a beautiful love song. You know, it's two guys or two girls or a girl and a boy at midnight. And I said, it's about vampires. I said, you know, so people will interpret it any way they want. But I think with Oculus, I took the idea that we should really say what it's about, because I think you get more invested in the story if you actually know what it's about in this particular case than you would trying to make it up for yourself.
Right. Right.
I may be wrong on that, but that's the way I thought about it.
Are you comfortable with it being called epic?
No, not really. I mean, I had this discussion with somebody only recently. It's not really an epic. It's 5 pieces of music which just happen to have no breaks. It's a bit like, as I said, it's a bit like going from Lamb Lies Down on Broadway through to In the Cage or something. You're telling a story, but that happens to have breaks. Mine doesn't. But it's they're not supposed to be an epic. It's not really Supper's Ready, or Close to the Edge or anything like that. It's five. It's an act. It's an overture and 4 acts of a play. There are some leitmotifs which permeate. There are things that recur and reoccur, but in essence, they are separate. They're telling different parts of the story, and they just happen to be buffered end to end, so they roll one into other rather than having a break. If I put them as breaks, nobody call it an epic. That you'd have a minute in the middle to get your breath back before going from Act 1 to Act 2. But
yeah,
I decided to make it run as one piece of music. But in essence, they are 5 distinct pieces of music buffered end to end.
right. So you would be uncomfortable with calling it an epic, but calling it epic without
Calling it
the
epic.
and.
Well, I guess I think it's got ideas above its station, if that's what you mean. I
Yeah.
call it a literary flight of fancy, which is what I think it is. It's a gothic tale of interdimensional travel and the perils therein. But is it epic? Yeah, I think at parts it gets very strident and epic, but I don't know really. It's not for me to judge whether it's epic. It's for the people who are listening to it to judge whether they think it's epic or not. I just think of it as being quite interesting and not bad lyric, really.
In my review, I called it epic, so I
Yeah,
guess,
that's fine. That's fine.
but not an epic, but did call it epic because the music reached certain heights for me,
Yeah.
brought emotions up in me, and I guess I think of something like that as being epic,
No,
whatever the
I think you can.
definition
I think
truly
that's a,
is.
a justifiable definition of what it is. To me, I can't really say that because I've lived with it for so flaming long. It's
Sure.
impossible. I lost all objectivity about it some years back. So all I can say is that I enjoyed writing it. I wanted to make it as emotionally packed as I possibly could. And if I've succeeded and it's reached you on an emotional level, I call it a good job day's work. That's it.
Typically, if I'm talking to somebody about a new release, a new musical release, we're also talking about going on the road.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
there's not much of a road in terms of live performances for Damanek this time around, is there?
Well, it's as I say, we're geographically challenged.
Yeah.
We can't even get in a room to write, never mind go on a tour. Last time we made it work because Sean wanted to bring Southern Empire across, and I could piggyback on the back of that. We had
Right.
Marek and I join Southern Empire, and in actual fact, and Dan was on board and he was over here, so that was fine. And then we brought in Luke to be the guitar player because he'd played on track and in flight, not all of it in flight, but some of it. So he was able to pick up the parts that he'd already composed, and we were doing that. But to do it again, we'd have to bring across. Well, Brody would have to come for the drums. Cam would have to come for the guitar. Nick Sinclair would probably have to come across for the bass. Obviously, Sean would have to be there. And so in the end, if we went on tour, it'd be Guy Manning and Southern Empire present. I mean, if Marek couldn't make all the tours, it'd be just me and in fronting Southern Empire. So it's a bit odd, really. But we could never say never. But that'd be the way it would have to be. We'd have to share the equipment, share the tour bus, and share the musicians to make it work. And then you've got the problem is, well, do these guys in Southern Empire really want to learn a whole set of Damanek material to play 5 shows? It's a big investment to play. Some of this is quite complicated. And they've got their own show, and then they're playing twice on the same night. One on the back of they're playing 2 shows, like Sean had to do on the last tour. Sean didn't mind because he loves it, but all the guys, well, Brody had to do it as well twice, funnily enough. But everybody would have to play twice, apart from me. The lucky me, I walk on with my harmonica, and then I'm off again. Bye. Yeah, so never say never, but we'd like to do it. But certainly this year's out of the question. Sean's up to his neck in Unitopia, Southern Empire, and then a Unitopia tour of Europe in the autumn over here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had several friends who saw the 2018 shows with Southern Empire and Damanek, and they said it was just fabulous. It was wonderful.
Well, we had a great
What all
time
came
doing it.
across.
We loved it. Didn't make any money, but we made, but we,
Yeah, well,
you know, you're never going to make money bringing people across from Australia.
that's right.
You know, that's just the way. And most of the venues these days are saying, well, yeah, okay. So you want to play? Okay, how many people are you going to bring in? And I'm going, hang on, I'll just. How many we got back there in the boot? You can't say. We hope to pack the place out, but you can't guarantee. Oh, well, if you can't guarantee 1,000 people, we're not interested. This was our first tour. There's no way we could do it. I think maybe coming back on the back of what we did last time, the last tour, and the stature of the album doing quite well at the moment. Yes, we could probably get more venues to sign up to putting us on, but it's not going to be till 2024 at the earliest, as I say, because Sean's up to his neck in other projects, shall we say. And so we have talked about it, and he would like to bring Southern Empire over again, I think. And if he does, then there's always a chance that we could hook up again, because it worked like clockwork last time. You know, so it worked very, very well. Everything went off like without a hitch, really. Whereas the UPF tour was another matter altogether. Oh God. So that had
by 2024, though, I can only imagine you're already getting ideas up and ready for the next Damanek album.
Well, yes, possibly, but we wouldn't be recording it till 2024 either, because there's no way we're going to fit it in this year. I've got a whole year if I want to write. And the way that Sean approaches it is very pragmatic. He says, well, let's see how Making Sure does first before you go off and write me another double album's worth, you know. And he's probably right. So I'm having a little break at the moment. I've got some other songs on another side project that I've picked up and put down and picked up and put down, working with other guys that I've worked with in the past from other bands, and sort of collaboration. And we'll see how that works out. And then that might give me something to do while I'm waiting. But yeah, I'd like to do another Damanek album. The problem we've got at the moment is that this one's done without being, you know, too crass or too self-reverential. This album's done so well that the big worry is, if I wrote another one, would it be better? You know, so it's a hard one to follow, I think, so far. Though we haven't had the real clunker in review that I'm waiting for. We've had one that wasn't as flattering as the others, but most of the other reviews have been, you know, just every time I read one, I go, really? Wow, another 5-star. Wow, you know, 5 stars, 4 stars. Wow, how are we going to better this one, fellas? You know, don't know.
Only a writer has to worry about that sort of thing. We're having success, but something could go wrong. Or how do we make the next one even better?
Well, I'd like to be able to sell a few copies of this one. I mean, I've always had, since releasing albums in 1999 onwards, I've always been very happy and very pleased that I've had sort of critical success. The albums have always been well received, well thought of, but never sold any. You know, the perennial problem. This one might have a chance of actually selling something, and maybe some of the back catalogue will sell on the back of it. But it's the first time we've had a chance of actually selling a few copies. And it may even make its way to vinyl, this one. Who knows?
Wow.
You know, if we get to that tipping point, then the record company might think, hello, little Erna, let's put it on vinyl. And that'd be another tick from my bucket list.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. We had Fall in Love with the World from UPF on vinyl. There's obviously the Tangent albums, the first few Tangent albums are being released, and I'm on those. But it's something about having written and produced the album and having it on vinyl of your own. It would be something special. So I'm hoping that maybe that might come this year sometime.
Well, I can tell you, not just you, but the people who are watching this, that it is well worth the purchase of Damanek's Making Sure. This is an absolutely stellar album, well put together, well presented, great performances from everybody. And I just play it over and over again. And I think I think if you purchase it, you will find the same thing, and you will understand that Guy Manning is a great, great talent.
Well, kind of you to say. Yes, please give us some money. No, I don't. I mean, the thing is, I always felt bad about having to go fund the thing. I always felt that it would be great to have your own pot of reservoir money from sales to be able to
Yeah.
call on, and we didn't, because, as I say, we're on GP, which is a lovely label, very supportive, but they're an independent small label, really.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so they're not going to give us it. They don't give us in advance. We just get some money for the sales on a unit by unit basis. So, and all that money I put into an account, and it goes to help me record the next one. But if we can sell a few copies of this, it would help. It certainly helped me in my retirement. And I'll be passing some money on to the other guys as well. So, and we've got to pay for the artwork, and we've got to pay for all these promo videos that keep popping up and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it's a costly business, writing music for yourself.
It is,
really,
especially nowadays. It's becoming
harder.
more so.
Yeah, don't get me started on Brexit. Anyway,
no,
but
no.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a hard life, but we wouldn't do it unless we wanted to. But the problem is you always put yourself out there, don't you? Put an album out and you cower and hide behind the parapet waiting for the reviews to come in, chewing your nails nervously and hoping people like it. And we've been very lucky and very blessed with this album.
I don't think you've been lucky.
Like
lucky is not the appropriate term, I think.
I'm not sure what it is, because who knows how people can take it. I've had some very strange comments about things on my albums in the past. I think my favorite one was somebody said that my singing was like the bastard child of Ian Anderson and a goat. That was one that stuck with me.
You excuse me laughing at that.
People can be so cruel. I don't know.
Yes,
no, I don't care. I published that one. I thought it was so funny. But people can be rotten sometimes for no reason whatsoever. So you take your chances. And as somebody who writes the material, I take a full responsibility. The success of the album rests firmly on my shoulders, I think, because it doesn't matter how well Sean produces it, you can't polish a turd. Without being rude, that's the way it is. If the songs have to be okay, otherwise stellar production doesn't help.
That's true.
So,
well, in a lot of people's opinions, including mine, including a lot of reviewers, this is an excellent album and well worth somebody kicking out some money to purchase it. Guy Manning is the central figure in the band Damanek, and the new release is out. It's Making Sure. And Guy, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
It's been great. I love talking about the music, and I don't get asked often enough. I'm very happy to talk about different things and get other people's points of view and the way that people think about it. It's always interesting to hear other people's takes on what I do, because I don't want to live in a vacuum or a bubble.
Sure.
I need to be interacting with people, and they need to tell me what they think, unless it's horrible and too rude, in which case keep it to yourself.
Exactly. Well, we will talk again at some point, because I see great things coming in the future for you and hopefully for the band.
Well, I hope so. That'd be lovely, wouldn't it? That's a nice thought.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll leave it off with, a nice thought. I'm Mark Boardman, and for the latest in music news, reviews, and interviews, check out Sonic Perspectives.